Good morning. I'm Neil Theobald, President of Temple University. I want to welcome all of you to this celebration of the life of Lewis Katz. We come here as the family, friends, and colleagues of someone who has touched each of us. This morning, we will hear from a few of Lewis's many friends. While they will speak individually, I believe you will find the combined memories will create a comprehensive image of this remarkable man. As we listen to this morning's remarks and to the lovely music being provided by our student quartet, I ask that we also remember 6 people who many of us will never have the privilege of knowing. Susan Asbell, Teresa Benhoff, Marcella Dalsey, Mike DeVries, Ann Leeds, and James McDowell. Their families are in our hearts and in our prayers. Less than 3 weeks ago, the Temple University community gathered across Broad Street to celebrate the achievements of our newest graduates. As we do each year, we also bestowed Temple's highest honor, an honorary doctoral degree, to a graduate whose life serves as an exemplar for our students. We were delighted this year to confer upon Lewis Katz an honorary doctorate. His acceptance speech was an absolute delight for everyone who was in attendance. You will see and hear some excerpts from his address at the conclusion of today's service. No one could have imagined that we would be here 20 days later paying a final tribute to Lewis. On the evening before our graduation, Lewis spoke at a dinner in the building right behind me here. There was a scene from Lewis's remarks that I hope will remain with me until my dying day. In his comments, Lewis mentioned he had recently read an essay written 2,000 years ago by the Roman philosopher Seneca. The title of the essay is particularly apt for us to consider today, On the Shortness of Life. In the essay, Seneca laments that most of us carelessly waste much of our short lives. Instead, Seneca urges us to focus on those activities that are really important. As Lewis spoke to this large gathering of distinguished guests, he stood at a lectern, similar to what I'm doing right now, but he was alternatively holding in his arms 2 of his granddaughters, Remy and Taryn. As Lewis spoke to the audience, his face, as well as those of Taryn and Remy, were just beaming. The utter joy with which they interacted told me that Lewis was doing just what Seneca calls for us to do. He was focusing his time on what's really important. Lewis stated these values succinctly to our graduates the next morning when he said, "Success isn't about material things. Work matters, but family matters more." I want to thank Lewis's family for allowing us to host this memorial service so that we may all share the memories of this extraordinary man. On behalf of Temple University, I want to extend our deepest sympathies to Melissa, Drew, Ethan, Brooke, Taryn, Remy, Sandra, and the rest of the Katz family. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Theobald. Thank you for hosting me here on this holiday. It's an honor to be able to pay tribute to a lifelong member of Congregation Bethel, mentor, teacher, friend of mine, Lewis Katz. I want to thank Temple University for hosting this Memorial Day and celebration. We don't do funerals on Yontif, but we celebrate life, and that's the way Lewis would want it, for us to mourn and for us also to be together and to look forward to a better future. I want to thank the university, Temple University, for taking a chance on me. I did not have the most stellar academic career in high school. And I came here and enrolled in a course that was called at the time Freshman Interdisciplinary Studies, and taught me how to learn. Changed my life, the most important college class I ever took in my life. More importantly, I want to just share two anecdotes and commend the university admissions who admitted Lewis Katz years and years ago. When Lewis graduated high school, he didn't think he was going to be going to college because his family didn't have any money. And so he enlisted the help of his Aunt Dora Rose, Zev's mom, who has political clout. And she arranged to have him get a scholarship here to Temple. And not too long ago, I was talking with your dad, and he smiled and he said, "Dollar for dollar, that's probably the best investment Temple University ever made." But I made Bill Cosby laugh. But Temple took a chance on Lewis, and the truth is that inspired him to take a chance on a lot more people as well. And I just want to share one quick story that he shared with me and shared with his family. Lewis at one time owned a number of golf courses. And one day he was standing outside of the club and he was looking at the driving range and he saw this little girl whacking at the ball. And she seemed to make contact every single time, and he thought that this girl was amazing. He went over to her father and said, "I think your daughter has real talent." And he said, "You should have her play real golf." Father said, I don't have the money for her to be able to play golf. We just stay on the outside. And he went over to the manager of the golf course and said, from now on, this father and this daughter should be able to come and play whenever they want, and they should be able to play for free. And years passed, and he got a letter from that little girl who had grown up to get a 4-year scholarship in golf to the University of Georgia and be the captain of that golf team. I think all of us have stories like that we could tell about the way Lewis made a difference in people's lives. Lewis's mother was not a very religious woman, your grandmother, but there were two very important religious priorities in her life. Number one was that Lewis have a bar mitzvah at Bethel, and I think that's why, Sandy, that's why it was so important for him to buy that old Bethel building and make it into a source of life and renewal for a whole new generation and put the Boys and Girls Club on the old Bethel site. So the first was that he be bar mitzvah, and he wanted that place where he was bar mitzvah to always be a beautiful place. And the second was to say Yizkor. And his mother, he told me, wanted him to go and say the Yizkor memorial prayers that Jews around the world tomorrow on Shavuos will be saying, because it was a way for him to connect, she said, with his father who he never met. And Sunday night, I said those prayers, and I know Drew, you Monday morning did the same thing in your dad's memory. Well, in the Yizkor memorial prayers, we pledge to live good lives guided by the values of the people who came before us, the people who gave our lives meaning. And if you want to honor Lewis's memory and perpetuate the values that made him so great then I'd urge you to do what he did and promise yourself here and now that you'll take a chance on somebody else. Extend a helping hand to someone who's forgotten and disillusioned, despondent, living without hope, because those people are around us all the time, and the problem is we don't see them, but Lewis did. And we need to as well. He saw potential in people who were otherwise invisible. He took a chance on others because he was forever repaying the debt of the people who took a chance on him. Well, people took a chance on you too, and we owe it to them and to Lewis to reach out and help them. Let Lewis's memory be an inspiration. Let his passing be a call to action. To hear that call is to reaffirm that even in his passing, his voice still speaks. To know him was to love him, and to love others is the best way to serve his memory.
Welcome to a celebration of Lewis Katz's life. We all miss him so. We all have our interesting stories about Lewis. He was so unique and so special to all of us. I did not know him when he was becoming a successful lawyer and businessman. I came to know him at a time when he was giving back, when he never forgot where he came from, not that he ever did. When it was always, what can I do for you, and never, what's in it for me? He was a very special man with a smile that would melt the coldest heart. I got an email last night from someone who'd never met him, but said, every picture I see of him, he has this contagious smile. It seems like he lived each day to the fullest and lived as we all should. Just think of him smiling down on you as you grieve this terrible loss. I came to love this man because he was so special, he was so giving, and so much fun to be with. I learned a great deal from him. To paraphrase George Bernard Shaw, a lot of people see things as they are and say, why? Lewis dreamed about things that never were and said, why not? That was Lewis Katz. He acted on his dreams. He loved his beloved alma mater, Temple, and a few weeks ago, he received an honorary degree and gave the commencement address. The address was profound, it was funny, and it was filled with great advice for our graduates. In short, it was the best speech I ever heard at this great university, given by a man who loved it and who loved him back, because Lewis was Temple-made. He was a valued member of our Board of Trustees who are here today to honor his memory. We will all miss his wise counsel and his thoughts. But Lewis's primary joy in his life was his family. His son Drew and Rachel, Melissa and Stephen, and his grandchildren, Ethan, Brooke, Taryn, and Remy. Your father and Poppy left you a great legacy, not based upon power or fame or money, but of love. And that's a legacy that will live in your hearts as long as you live, because you know how much he loved and cared for you and wanted you to go on to be strong. Lewis's death leaves a huge void here at Temple, in our lives and in the lives of his family. But I will remember Lewis this way, in the works of Shakespeare. When he shall die, cut him out into little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night and pay no attention to the garish sun. So let the light that Lewis brought to every gathering, to every room he entered, continue to shine, as I know when he entered heaven, the lights went on with that contagious smile of Lewis that made everyone smile as he did me. I was privileged to know him. God bless, Godspeed. Thank you.
term great man is probably one of the most overused in our lexicon today. Sometimes it's attached to celebrities who've really done nothing very breathtaking or achieving. But Lewis Katz was a great man. He was a great man not because of his achievements in business, in philanthropy, in sports, although they were many and pretty astounding. Not the last of which was, I think, the crowning achievement of his life, when he and his friend and partner, Jerry Lenfest, paid tens of millions of dollars more than common economics said they should have, to make sure that the Inquirer and the Daily News would stay afloat, would stay in Philadelphia, and would stay free from interference. But Lewis was a great man for things that never made the newspapers, never made TV. He was a great man because, first, he made life so much fun for his friends, and I know I'm talking to 1,000 plus of his friends. I said 2 days ago on TV, I said, the world will never be as much fun for us as it was Saturday afternoon. He was incredible with his spontaneity and his wit and his humor and his mischievousness. My wife Midge said if you had a dinner appointment with Lewis, you smiled throughout the entire day just thinking of what was about to happen to you and what you were about to undertake. He did things that were absolutely incredible. I remember once we were at Coaches versus Cancer, a fundraiser for the coaches, and Coach Dunphy, I'm sure, is here today, and I'm sure he remembers it. And we wanted to do something big. So Lewis said, let's auction off a trip to the presidential libraries. We'll go to Eisenhower and Truman in Kansas and Missouri. We'll fly out on our plane. I'll take care of all of the expenses. Midge will talk to them about the Supreme Court. You can talk to them about politics. So we put a group of about 10 people together with the auction winners, and we flew out. Now, I was governor then, so I couldn't fly on the plane. I had to fly commercial. So I'm sitting in the airport in St. Louis Sunday afternoon after our weekend was over. And I get a call from Midge, and she says, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? He said, Lewis asked us when we got on the plane, how many of us had never been to Mount Rushmore? And about half of the people raised their hands. And he said, I was just at Mount Rushmore with Tom Daschle. You've got to see it. So Midge said, I'll be home around 1 o'clock tonight. And she said, we're about to take off. He ordered the pilots to go to South Dakota. I said, he did what? If you were a friend of Lewis Katz, you used the term, he did what? An awful lot. Amazing guy, fun. He enjoyed making sure we had fun. We as friends, people he met 40 seconds ago. He wanted them to have fun. He wanted them to experience the things that he experienced. But most of all, Lewis was a great man for the countless, thousands and thousands of small acts of kindness that he did. I had a friend who said, your friend Lewis Katz gives away a lot of money because he wants to see his name on buildings. No, he doesn't. That's not why he did it. Although I remember once when a great fundraiser, who will remain nameless, was talking to Lewis at lunch, and Lewis asked me to go along, I guess for protection, although he didn't need any protection. And the fundraiser, who was just incredible at persuading people to do stuff and to give big checks, was telling Lewis about the opportunity to have this building built in his honor. And he said, finally he reached a crescendo and he said, and Lewis, we can name the building after your mother. Without missing a second, Lewis leaned over and whispered to him, I never really liked my mother. Now, of course, Lewis loved his mother. And of course, do you think he gave the money? He sure did. He sure did. But the spontaneous acts of kindness for people he never knew, he didn't give his name to, they never knew who he was, were absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. For 15, 20 years, Lewis and I would meet down at the shore on Sunday mornings. We'd go to a place in the Ocean City Boardwalk called Bob's Grill. And we go there, and after we were finished, they'd give us the check. Lewis would put a $100 bill on top of the check because he loved the young high school and college students who were working there, mostly young girls, who were just working so hard to get their education. But they never knew his name, and they never knew whether the check came from him or me. And they knew my name. So 10 days ago, I met a friend of Lewis's and mine, Herb Viederman, at the Bob's Grill. And all of a sudden, the waitress put the check on the table when we were finished, and I panicked. I said, Herb, how much money do you have? And Herb and I, over the cost of the breakfast, we had $20. So we left the most disappointing $20 tip in history. But in the op-ed piece I had the privilege to write for the Inquirer yesterday, I talked about stories that most of you have told me. And we could be here till nighttime telling stories, but I want to just recount a few of them. I heard that Lewis would always pass by a double amputee who was in a wheelchair and begged for money on Madison Avenue. But when the weather was extremely hot or extremely cold, Lewis would go out of his way to go to Madison Avenue. He'd say to the guy, how much have you made today? And Lewis would give him a figure. Lewis said, I'll triple it, and he would give him a $100 bill, but on the condition that you get out of this weather because you're going to get sick. Lewis did that over and over again. The man never knew his name, never made the newspaper. He just wanted to do it because he cared about that man and was worried he would freeze to death. I once called Lewis when I was no longer governor because a young lady had come into my office and she said, I can't make the tuition increase. I'm at my limit with student loans. I work, but I'm going to have to drop out of school and I'm going to be a senior this fall. I can't do it. Is there anything you can do? So I called Lewis and I said, Lewis, can you call the financial aid department of this university? He said, I'll take care of it. And I later found out she called me and said, thank you very much. Someone took care of it. And what Lewis did, he didn't call the financial aid office and tell them to renegotiate the loan documents. He just gave a check for the overage. Never met Lewis, never heard his name. One day, our good friend Eric Aresti told me a story about, he called Lewis on his cell phone. And he said, where are you? And Lewis said, I'm in Rittenhouse Square. He said, what are you doing? He said, well, I just saw a woman crying on a park bench. And I asked her what was wrong. And she told me her husband had just lost his job that morning. And they had no family income whatsoever. And they had 2 kids, and she had no idea how they were going to get by. Lewis told Eric he couldn't talk because he was taking her up to Temple to get her a job. And I'm sure, Mr. President, that's not a unique experience. She got a job, that family stayed afloat and stayed intact. One day Lewis was driving home and it had been a brutal snowstorm. And he saw some young teenagers clearing the steps, shoveling the steps of some houses. And he was curious, so he stopped and said, what are you boys doing? And they told him that these were the houses of the senior citizens in their neighborhood who would have no chance to shovel off their own steps and would be trapped in their houses. He said, do they know you're doing this? They said no. Lewis took several $100s out of his wallet and gave them each $200 and told them, if you keep doing things like that, you're going to be very successful in life. Then there was a time when Lewis was in a doctor's office waiting for his appointment, and he saw a woman and a young teenager. And of course, Lewis engaged him in conversation. Did he never, ever stop to not engage someone in conversation? And he found out that the boy had cancer. They were from out of town. They had very little money, but someone had suggested they come see this specialist. And they were staying in New York for 2 days. Lewis found out from them what hotel they were staying at, and when they got back from the hotel after going to the doctor's appointment, they found out that they had tickets to the best and hottest Broadway show and dinner paid for at one of New York's best restaurants. I spoke to Kathleen Palella, Lewis's wonderful executive assistant, on Sunday afternoon. Kathleen said to me, "I'm lost. He was my champion." Well, Kathleen, you're not alone. He was all of our champions. He was a champion to that amputee. He was a champion to those young teenage boys. He was a champion to the woman who had to make the tuition increase. He was a champion to that woman who needed a job. He was a champion to that cancer patient and his mom. He was a champion to thousands who never knew his name, doing things that would never make the paper. Since I wrote the op-ed piece yesterday, I've been inundated with emails, and I wanted to read you, and it's consistent with what the rabbi said. I wanted to read you two excerpts from two of the emails. They were both from people who'd never met Lewis Katz. One said, "He definitely was quite a man who touched a lot of lives. Hopefully, his shining example of how to treat others can live on in all of us." The second said, "May all of us do a little more to try and compensate in a small way for this terrible loss." We always talk about legacy for politicians, legacy for business people, legacy for actresses. If Lewis could have left a legacy, if he could tell us the legacy he wanted to leave us, the legacy would have been just what the rabbi said. For each of us, we're busy, we've got family considerations, we've got our own careers to worry about. Lewis would say, do things for people who need your help. In the great graduation speech that the president and Pat O'Connor referenced, his wonderful graduation speech at Temple, he gave a quote from the great UCLA basketball coach, John Wooden. And the quote was, "You'll never live a perfect day without doing something for someone who will never be able to repay you." Rest in peace, Lewis. You lived many, 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 many perfect days.
This day is mostly for Drew and Melissa and Sandra and the family and the people that knew Lou best and loved him most. But I was looking at all of you and listening to what everybody said. And here's why I think we're all here. Once in a while, all together too rarely in life, someone lives and just exudes, just pouring out of every pore in their skin, such goodwill and energy and joy that they create this magnetic field. It draws all the rest of us in. And while we're in it, we walk a little more erect and we feel a little more energy and we feel elevated because we're in this magnetic field. Ed Rendell was up here crying because he was never as happy in his life as when he was making fun things with Lou Katz. Oh, he loved being governor, he loved being mayor, he loved being prosecutor. But the first time we were all three together, they made me play Nerf basketball in the office room. I did not win. When Lou was here a few weeks ago, he said that life is meant to have as much fun as you can conjure up, but you have to make time for those who need you and causes you believe in. The reason he created this field is he took his own advice, something rarely do the rest of us do. I can just hear him now. Can you believe I got Bill Clinton finally to come to Philadelphia for something besides a fundraiser? I get elected president with his help. We have the first big fundraiser for the Democratic Party. Governor, you'll have to forgive me if I say this. Lou was a good Democrat, but he was like me, he actually had Republican friends, which appears to be somehow disqualifying in the crazy world we live in today. But anyway, he loved Ron Brown, the first African-American chairman of the Democratic Party, and he was determined that he would succeed. And when we lost the White House in 1988, there were a lot of people who really believed that there would never be another Democratic president. Now there are people who believe we can elect a Democratic president, but we'll never have another Democratic Congress or whatever. In other words, nobody knows what they're thinking when they predict the future. But he wanted Ron Brown to succeed. When Ron Brown took office, the Democratic Party, the National Party, had exactly $8,000 in the bank and could not make payroll. And Lewis Katz said, they got to be able to pay those kids. And he flew to Washington and gave Ron Brown and his assistant, Alexis Herman, later my Secretary of Labor, Lewis Katz gave him $100,000. And in 1989, that was a lot of money. And we made payroll, the rest is history. So then we went in 92 and we had this big fundraiser. Lou's the head of it. So we're sitting up there and I noticed he was a little nervous. I said, well, this is a great turnout. What are you nervous about? He said, look, before I get up to introduce you, you have to lean over and whisper in my ear. I said, okay, what do you want me to say? He said, I don't care. Say anything you want, but he said, if you whisper in my ear, they'll think I'm close to you and I can get them to give more money. And he said, hey, I might get lucky and they'll use our parking too. So he's about to get up and I whispered, Lou, you're a putz. So help me. He didn't smile, he nodded his head gravely, as if I had just given him the nuclear codes. And he walked up and made his speech. A few weeks ago, we had a lunch here in Philadelphia where Lou was trying to help me raise money for my foundation work around the world. And Rabbi, I know that he was a good Jewish boy, but he sounded like an evangelical tent preacher hustling the money. He said, we can do this. We will do this. He didn't ask him beforehand. I could tell. He made a commitment for everybody. But the thing I love most about him was he never forgot people who started as he did with nothing and couldn't escape it. It bothered him that anybody with any dreams would be left out or left behind. In 1999, Lou went with me to New Jersey to talk about this idea I had. The economy was booming, everybody was doing great, except everybody wasn't doing great. There were pockets in America in urban areas and rural areas that had felt no benefits of the longest economic expansion in history. Nothing. So we were looking for ideas about what could be done. And Lou was heavily involved with the Nets at the time. He and Ray Chambers were there, and we had this meeting. And I never will forget the commitment he made to just keep working until there was economic opportunity everywhere. My defining memory of him in the last dozen years or so, since I got out of politics more than he did, was at the 2007 Clinton Global Initiative. Andre Agassi was on the program talking about this charter school he started in Las Vegas. And he explained how it worked and how it was open all hours of the day and night, and all the families could come in and out. And the school had just been rated the best performing school in the state, even though it was in the poorest neighborhood in Las Vegas. And the minute Lou heard that, now everybody at Clinton Global Initiative is supposed to make a commitment, but they come up on a stage and it's orderly. And Lou jumps up in the crowd and says, I'll do that. I'll do that in New Jersey. I'll do it in Camden. I don't care what it costs, and I'll pay for all of it. He was just so overcome. And unlike a lot of people who say stuff like that and nothing ever happens, he had to work for 5 years to get that school set up. But a lot of you know there's now a second one. I will never forget that. If more of us acted on our better impulses and then kept our commitments on our better impulses, even if it took us 5 years to do it, think what a different world we would be living in today. Even if we never had anything like Lou Katz's money, just think about it. Think about every good idea. And if we only acted on it. So here's what I want to say. He took a trip that we couldn't imagine. His life force was such we always thought he'd be around forever. I did. If anybody had asked me, I'd say, oh, Lou Katz will get a good seat at my funeral. But he's on a journey we all have to take. He left the magnetic field. It's still here. That's why we're here. We can't walk away from the reality that is still here. And someday you'll hear him saying, oh yeah, we can do this. Come on. Say you'll do it. And we'll have such a good time trying. So thank you, Lou Katz, for what you did for me, for never giving up in the darkest hours, and for making sure that we had a good time trying.
Drew and Melissa and the entire family, I want you to know that Sue, who's with me here, and I are keeping all of you in our prayers. And we, as everybody here, everybody watching this from other locations, miss Lewis. And we join with you in that sadness. I suppose as governor, I should talk about Lewis's extraordinary career in law and in business, or about his philanthropy to Pennsylvania's educational and cultural institutions, about his commitment to integrity in journalism. Under ordinary circumstances, I would be honored to eulogize a distinguished citizen of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And make no mistake about it, Lewis was as much a Pennsylvanian as he was a New Yorker or a Jersey boy. But as we know, these are not ordinary circumstances, and nothing about this man, as you have heard and as you know, is ordinary. Like so many of you, Sue and I counted Lewis as a friend. When reading the reports of his death, his tragic death, we were struck by the number of friends who have been with him for decades. In comparison, our friendship with Lewis was young, but what it lacked in longevity, it made up for in intensity. When Lewis opened his arms as a friend, you know he opened them wide. Our adventure with Lewis started about 5 or 6 years ago when Sue was seated next to him at a dinner party in New York. She told him about her job at the Gettysburg Foundation. He told her a funny story about valuable Lincoln documents he had acquired because a stranger at an auction was rude to him. You obviously all have experience of that. By the end of the evening, Lewis asked to take a tour of Gettysburg battlefield and offered to loan his documents for an exhibition at the new museum in Gettysburg. From that day forward, Lewis and Sue would maneuver to sit next to each other at any dinner party, including visits to the governor's residence. Lewis was surprised when Sue and I first invited him to the residence. He had been a frequent guest of the Rendells, but the guest of a Republican governor? He said he wanted to see if his name was still on the door to the Lewis Katz guest suite. And he told us that he had scratched his initials into the bottom of the bed before Ed left office. As governor, you wait for the ask. Most people have an issue, a favor, or a problem, and Lewis Katz was no different. But in this case, Lewis was always altruistic. Our conversations often focused on strengthening the two Pennsylvania institutions he loved, Temple and Dickinson. I appreciated his creative thought process, his innovative solutions to challenges, and truly his sound advice. We even ventured into political discussions and found that we had more in common than not. The professional became personal. Lewis was in and out of our lives for the last few years. We'd be busy and out of touch for weeks and even months. And then we'd receive a text from him where we would prompt the next encounter with him. Luckily for Sue and me, we were fully engaged with him in the last 6 weeks. When Sue became First Lady, though, Lewis one time told her that if she ever needed money to help someone, just ask. She never did that until 6 weeks ago, when there was an exceptionally young, talented student from a central Pennsylvania high school who had been accepted to a fashion design school, I believe in New York. But his immigration status and family circumstances would prevent him from attending. Lewis asked to meet the young man who, coincidentally, was named Luis. And they talked on the back porch of the residence, the screen porch. In less than 10 minutes, Lewis made an offer that would change the trajectory of that young man's life. And then he asked for only one thing of the young man. When Luis became a huge success, that he would help someone else. Then Lewis, in his unique way, bounded out of the room in his neon green sneakers and his sweats so he could change for the dinner party that night. And as usual, he was the life of the party that night. He made new friends. And of course, he was seated next to Sue. He stayed overnight as the weather had become too terrible for his helicopter. And before he could go up to his room, Sue hung a paper on the door that said the Lewis Katz Suite. Unfortunately, a previous engagement prevented me from attending the dinner that you've heard about already at Temple to honor Lewis and two others receiving honorary doctorate degrees. Sue was there, seated next to Lewis, as usual. And she said it was a joyful occasion, and she met Lewis's family, his adorable granddaughters, whom he spoke of often to us. And as usual, Lewis was so happy. She was given an impromptu opportunity to speak and had intended to tell the story of Lewis and Luis. But on the way to the lectern, she decided the story was perhaps too personal to share with a room full of strangers. And besides, she told me, she would cry and her mascara would run. So Sue sent him a text the next day and told him what she had wanted to say that evening before. He sent a text back to say that her beautiful message left him speechless, and that he thought the three of us would remain friends forever. And Sue and I both agreed. My last exchange with Lewis was to congratulate him on the successful acquisition of the Inquirer. On this Sunday afternoon, I found Sue in the resident's guest bedroom, on her stomach, with a flashlight, searching for his initials under the bed. He had left a wonderful message in the room's guest book, but his initials were nowhere to be found. His initials are there now. Rest in peace, Lewis.
At Lewis's funeral yesterday, I had the occasion to speak to a dear mutual friend of the family's and mine, sitting in the front row, Dr. Leoff. And he told me that according to Judaism, it is the right thing to do at someone's funeral to tell the truth about them. Don't exaggerate their good deeds and don't dwell too much on their negative parts. And so I feel that I might have to break with tradition a little bit and be honest with you all about my experiences with Lewis Katz. I was asked by him one time in my entire life for a favor, something I had never heard before. And I was so excited about doing this favor for it until he asked me, would I please come to the Southern Jersey Lubavitch dinner and present him with the award that the Lubavitchers were giving him. I immediately knew that he is so mischievous that he wanted someone that was very obviously a goy to give the speech for him. Now, if that wasn't enough, when I got up and tried to speak, it's the only time it's ever happened in my life where I was to be honoring someone, and Lewis, sitting at a table, began to heckle me when I was trying to say things nice about him. As I tried to go on and demonstrate my knowledge of Judaism, that just was to his delight. And before the speech was over, he had shaken down a rabbi, not for money, but for his black hat and his tzitzis. He couldn't quite get the tzitzis off, but before I knew it, I was standing on stage with a black Lubavitcher's hat, trying to give my culmination of my speech that I thought was going to be meaningful, but now everyone was just laughing at me. And so being that this is the second time I want to speak about Lewis, I do not have a black hat, but I will, in his honor, put on a kippah. I first met Lewis at a Nets game. I walked in, I was rising in Newark politics, and I walked in, and everyone in that box treated me like I was somebody special. I didn't know Lewis Katz only by reputation, but I was very excited to meet him, and as everybody was praising me, I was some rising star. I met him, and he could not have been more gruff and dismissive. I said, "Sir, I'd like to sit down with you," and he just pointed to his assistant and said, "Give her your number." I soon realized, though, as I got to know him better, that this was a mission by Lewis. You see, he in his life sought to elevate the most humble of people. And in any chance he got, he tried to knock down folks who had fancy titles. Now, I'm about to scare my best friend Drew to death right now, because one of my favorite stories is how Lewis Katz, on a receiving line for a president of the United States, not President Clinton, but President Carter, made a bet with his friend that he could tell the president a dirty joke and get away with it. I wish there was a camera on Drew right now, because he looks so scared that I actually might tell the joke that his father told. But let's just say the joke was dirty. And he whispered it into Jimmy Carter's ear. At which point the Secret Service grabbed him very unceremoniously and kicked him out of the establishment. And I don't think there has ever been in the history of the United States someone who was grabbed by the Secret Service and kicked out of an establishment and was laughing and smiling the entire way. Because indeed he had won the bet. As I got to know Lewis more and more, went on vacations with him and took long walks with him and talked with him, I began to understand that the harder he rode me, the more he loved me. The last 6 months and 7 months of his life, after my father had died, our conversations became a little more tender. And by tender, I don't mean he was in any way nice with me. My favorite quote in the days before my senatorial campaign was really getting going. We're having a long conversation over the telephone, and Lewis tells me, Corey, don't think you're any special because if you get elected to the United States Senate, because any idiot can get elected to office. In fact, most idiots do. It is what you do with the office. He was telling me, in fact, that titles don't make men, men make titles. I tell you, I don't know if Lewis had any great titles before his name, but Lord knows he was a model of a man. To me, as a guy who loves his son like a brother, I felt indeed like he was a father figure to me. And I knew I wasn't alone, because when I talked to other leaders who knew him, that was what I got from them. I'll never forget winning the mayor's office in Newark and having a conversation with Ed Rendell, calling him up because Ed was one of my heroes. When I read a prayer for the city, it was like a model for something and someone I wanted to be. And here I get him on the phone and have this conversation with this great man, and this is the advice he gives me. He says, look, I'll come talk to you, I'll send somebody on my staff. But the last thing he said to me is, he goes, that Lewis Katz, keep him close. He will be there for you for anything you need, especially if it's something that won't be in the headlines. This was who Lewis Katz was. Now, I feel a kinship with him because as much as he might have tried to make me an honorary Jew, I wish I could make him an honorary black man. Maybe posthumously I could bestow that honor on him. I'll have to check the Senate to see if I have that ability. But I say that because from my cultural tradition, I learned about what it means to be beat down low, what it means to face the ugliness of life, the bitterness of life, and to face it and not yourself grow bitter. If you listen to the blues, if you listen to great poets like Langston Hughes, if you listen to writers like Zora Neale Hurston, who said so eloquently, what can be applied to Lewis Katz is that I have been through sorrow's kitchen and I have licked all the pots. Something about the pain of his childhood, something about the death and struggle that he faced did not reduce him to be selfish and angry or full of spite. It made him more magnanimous and loving. It helped him to see the divinity not in kings and queens and presidents and senators, but to be able to look on every single person, black or white, Christian or Jewish. He seemed to be drawn to those who were had faced the most difficult path. This is what I loved about him, because whether it was a child born to difficult circumstances in Camden, whether it was someone that he met on a grocery store checkout line, he saw their dignity and their worth, and he elevated it even higher. This, I believe, is the greatest calling. Don't preach to me about your religion. Show it to me in how you treat other people. Don't tell me how much you love your God. Show it to me in how much you love all his children. This was the love that Lewis had, and it was like a gravity that pulled people to him. I got wonderful notes from people all over the country sending me emails knowing how close I was to the family. And one of my favorite ones is from a guy who runs a homeless center, homeless program for youth, Covenant House, who went on and on and on about how special he was. And I'm telling you, every time I would talk to Lewis and want to talk to him about something political, he would take me back to the Boys and Girls Club, to a charter school in Camden, to some mission that he was on, Big Brothers and Big Sisters. And the note I got from Kevin Ryan was so special, reminding me of conversations I had with him. He said to Kevin and to me that I judge how well I've done on a daily basis by how I answer the question, which is simply, have I made life better for someone else? Like that Quaker ideal saying that I shall pass this way but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or kindness that I can show, let me do it now. Let me not hesitate or equivocate, defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. This, to me, is why the title that he seemed to be most proud of were the simplest of titles. The title of friend, the title of father, and definitely the title of grandfather. And so now I tell you I worry, because I am a man of faith, and I do believe that he is in heaven right now, and I worry because I just hope he didn't go up to God and say, hey, God, any idiot can create the earth. But it takes special people to tikkun olam, to heal the world. Anybody can die. Lewis Katz lived. And the beauty of how he lived is that he touched so many lives that generations yet unborn will benefit from his love. And that means that his life will be eternal, that his love will go on into perpetuity. And with that, in honor of my friend, a father figure, the dad to some of the people I care about most in the world, I simply say, Yasher Koach.
Drew and Melissa, entire family, President Theobald and Chairman O'Connor, thank you, as usual, Temple, making itself available under all kinds of circumstances. I won't do what I might normally do, which of course is to recognize a lot of people. I will, of course, acknowledge President Clinton and hope that all the other electeds, through the power and presence of President Clinton being here, will accept that as an acknowledgement of all of our great elected officials, union leaders, community leaders, and many, many others. My remarks today will be in a certain context, so I want to acknowledge that. First and foremost, I met Lewis a number of years ago through Governor Rendell, which I greatly appreciate. Lewis has been a friend ever since, and much like what the governor obviously told our friend Senator Booker, he said the same to me, that Lewis would always be there. And our relationship was, I would characterize as episodic. We did not go a lot of places together, we didn't do a lot of things together, but we knew how to be in touch with each other when necessary, and it was always good. A lot of things have happened in the last week, and so that's the context of my comments. A week ago today, in the morning, I called Lewis on his cell phone. He answered, and it was to congratulate him and Jerry Lenfest on what had happened the day before. He was pleased, he was excited, he was already talking about the future. I said, please let Jerry know. He said, oh, Jerry's right here next to me. Gave him the phone. And I chatted with Jerry, and it was just a great conversation. And 1 week later, we're here. And look around at all of us here together, and I'm sure many others who could not be here. So many different relationships, so many different people, so many unique interactions. And yet Lewis figured out how to make each and every one of them personally special. That takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, a lot of work, and I think most importantly for him, a lot of caring. Sudden, tragic, unbelievable, sad. And these are just a few of the words that all of us have used to try to describe our feelings and emotions since Saturday night or Sunday morning when we woke up last week. And it's in these moments of incredible sorrow that I often turn to the Bible for comfort, solace, or understanding. I cannot, of course, understand what happened or why. But God did tell us that there will be things we would not know. In Matthew 24, 36 to 44. And the Lord said, "But about that day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill. One will be taken and the other left. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this. If the owner of the house had known at what time of the night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. And so you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him." This past Saturday night, Sunday morning, was certainly a wake-up call for so many of us. All of us who are not doing something today because we'll do it tomorrow must pay attention. There are no tomorrows if we don't deal with today. It seems that Lewis was always dealing with today, doing his work today, making things better today. But he was always working on, planning on, and getting ready for tomorrow, the future, a better life for others. Life is so precious. Life is fragile. The Bible talks about in the twinkling of an eye. And every day we're at risk of not having another day. So it is true what Pat O'Connor said. We will not pass this way again. Well, Lewis Katz didn't just pass this way. Oh, he stopped. He smelled those roses. He did good things. He made things better for many men and women, boys and girls. He stopped, looked, and listened, and then acted. Lewis lived his life to the fullest and was full of life, always working, always thinking, always trying to do more and better. Think about that. Trying to do more and better. As the president said, imagine if more of us were committed to doing more and better for people, for our communities, for our institutions, for this city. What an even greater city we would be. We'd stop killing each other. We'd look after our children better. We'd make decisions based more on purpose than on personal benefit. We'd give more of ourselves to improving our communities. Well, Lewis gave and gave and gave and gave and then gave some more. I liked him as a person. I liked him as a man. I liked him as a listener. And I loved him as an advisor. He gave good counsel. He told the truth. He gave honest views, and he was kind. I've read all the stories in the aftermath of Saturday night, Sunday morning. And I've read a lot of words and descriptors, and everyone has had one. Well, my word on Lewis is kind. Lewis Katz was a kind, gentle soul who did take very seriously. It's been attributed to many, but I remember hearing it from Senator Robert Kennedy. He did dream things that never were and asked why not. Lewis always asked why not and then did. Thank you, Lewis, for always asking and then for doing. God bless you all in the memory of our good friend, Lewis Katz.
When I think of Lewis Katz, I think of a man in motion, a man with a mission, a man of unsurpassed passion, a man of unsurpassed compassion. Knowing Lewis over the last 8 years and then reading about him over the last 3 days, I came to realize that no one could catalog all that he'd done in his remarkable life, or all that he had contributed, all that he had given to his beloved family, his friends, and the untold organizations and people that benefited from his generosity and from his time. It was literally impossible to keep up with Lewis, whether you were walking around Rittenhouse Square, traversing the sidewalks of New York, or the beaches of Longport. You had to be in the same shape as Bill Cosby back when he was running hurdles for Temple in 1960 to keep up with Lewis. But in all that swirl of activity, there were also important and unshakable constants in Lewis's life. His love of and his pride in his wonderful family. I can recall many long talks with Lewis in which his cell phone would ring, and he would always ignore the call, except when the number that flashed up on the screen was Drew's. No matter how serious the conversation we were having, he would always interrupt. And whether that conversation lasted 2 minutes or a half hour, the conversation would always close with these 3 words: I love you. Always, I love you. Every one of today's speakers could spend hours describing how Lewis enriched their lives, because that is what he did. He enriched people's lives. So I want to relate 3 short stories that, in my opinion, illuminate Lewis's lifetime loyalty to his friends and how his expansive generosity and spirit enhanced the lives of everyone he came in contact with. Early in 2012, I was teaching journalism at Arizona State when I received a call one Sunday morning from Lewis out of the clear blue. He was thinking of investing in a new company that would own the Inquirer, the Daily News, and Philly.com. He asked me if I could meet him at a restaurant in Paradise Valley. We spent an hour together, Lewis asking questions absorbing information, probing, dissecting, analyzing. When he was focused on a subject, as all of us who knew him know, he was downright brilliant. When we were finished our talk, Lewis asked me if I had time to meet a few of his friends, and I said yes. The friends, it turned out, all about 70 years old, were 5 couples whom Lewis had known since he was in junior high school in Camden, more than 50 years before. He treated every one of them to a wonderful weekend in Arizona at one of the most beautiful resorts in America. Lewis did that every single year. The men recalled the precision of Lewis's unerring jump shot. The women, yes, Bill, unerring jump shot. The women recalled his good looks, his charm, his eloquence. It was a beautiful experience for Lewis, for his friends, and for me, our friend Lewis Katz. Moving ahead in time, I returned to Philadelphia as the editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer in April 2012, thanks to the efforts of Lewis, my colleague Nancy Phillips, and George Norcross. One day, when Lewis made one of his frequent and always spontaneous visits to the newsroom, I invited him to lunch at Pagano's. That's a scrumptious delicatessen buried in the bowels of the subway concourse below our building on Market Street. I can't remember exactly what kind of sandwich Lewis ordered, but when he arrived, he clearly loved what he saw. And he handed the sandwich maker, his name was Theo, a tip that was twice as large as the price of the sandwich. Since then, whenever I go to Pagano's, Theo always asks for the man he calls my friend. Lewis, as some of our friends have pointed out, treated everyone, from the counterman at the deli, to the receptionist at a hospital, to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, the same way, with dignity, with respect, and most of all, warmth. Our friend, Lewis Katz. Because time is of the essence today, I will close with one final yarn. On June 2nd last year, Lewis took Nancy, myself, and a group of colleagues to New York to see the play Lucky Guy. It was the story of a brilliant newspaper columnist, Mike McAlary, played by Tom Hanks. Lewis had known McAlary, who had a brilliant and tragic career. Lewis had already seen the play at least once, perhaps twice, but he knew that every one of us in the group, those for whom printer's ink flowed in our veins, would love it. I sat next to Lewis for the whole play, and at several intervals, I could sense him watching me as I was thoroughly engrossed in the music, the revelry, the unforgettable barroom and newsroom scenes. I knew intuitively that Lewis was there because he wanted to make sure that we were having a great time. He was enriching our lives. It was his mission. He succeeded. Our friend, Lewis Katz. So how do we go on from here? On Monday, Tuesday, like many of you, I've received an avalanche of email, so many that it's impossible to even politely respond. But one I thought was important to share with all of you because I think it's one of the most meaningful. It came from a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, a friend and colleague of ours, named Gary Cohn. Gary worked with me at the Inquirer and later at the Baltimore Sun. As we all know, Lewis worked with the legendary columnist Drew Pearson. I believe Drew is named in his honor. Gary Cohn, the reporter who sent me the email, had the same job as Lewis for Drew Pearson's protege, Jack Anderson. And this is what Gary had to say, talking about Lewis's great attributes. Quote, "I'm certain that the best tribute to Mr. Katz would be to continue to do excellent journalism." So I thank you very much, Lewis Katz, our friend, and I thank all of you here whom he united. Thank you.
It was both my unhappy fate and good fortune to be with Lewis Katz in the last hours of his life. A great friend of mine for nearly 20 years, Lewis arrived at our house in Concord, Massachusetts at 4 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, bringing with him 3 friends and colleagues, Marcella, Susan, and Anne. He came to support a kickoff event celebrating the Concord River Institute, an interdisciplinary experimental school founded by my son, Michael, at which students, teachers, and administrators work together in order to improve instruction for students of all backgrounds and abilities. Like so much else Lou did, he took the time to champion something he cared deeply about, in this case, the reform of our educational system in the ongoing effort to create greater equity for all students in the country. Lewis was in terrific spirits that sunny afternoon. His negotiations for control of the Philadelphia Inquirer had just been completed. A great adventure lay before him. He told me he felt like a young boy again, ready to throw himself into the world of journalism where his stellar career had begun so many years ago. Indeed, what made Lewis so special, I believe, was that all his life he retained the best qualities of the little boy: vitality, enthusiasm, joy, playfulness, curiosity, and above all, a sense of wonder about life itself. How prophetic it was that on that Saturday afternoon, Lewis was still carrying in his pocket that small book on the shortness of life by Seneca. In the series of essays that comprised what would then be the last book that Lewis would ever read, Seneca said, "If you learn how to live, when your last day comes, you will not hesitate to meet death with a steady step." And as everyone here knows, Lewis Katz surely knew how to live. Indeed, he lived life to the absolute fullest. So it was as we headed toward the Colonial Inn for dinner after the event, Lewis had yet another small adventure in mind, and how curious it is when I realized what it was. He asked if we could stop at the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery across the street from the restaurant. He wanted to climb what is known as Author's Ridge, where the graves of Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Louisa May Alcott, and Nathaniel Hawthorne rest side by side, companions in death as they were in life. Nearby is the grave of Daniel Chester French, another Concord resident who sculpted the statue of Abraham Lincoln that sits in the center of the Lincoln Memorial. When we sat down for dinner, we talked about the fact that these old Concord residents are memorialized not only at Sleepy Hollow, but in half a dozen schools and buildings that bear their name, carrying the memory of their lives and their deeds from one generation to the next. And loyal friend that he was, having listened to me lecture about President Lincoln half a dozen times, coming to Philadelphia, New Jersey, and Gettysburg, Lewis understood how central the power of memory was to Abraham Lincoln. In his mid-30s, Lincoln fell into a depression so deep that his friends removed all knives, scissors, and razors from his room, fearing he would kill himself. His closest friend went to his bedside and warned Lincoln in a conversation both men would remember as long as they live, that if he did not rally, he would most certainly die. Lincoln said he was more than willing to die right then, but he had not yet done anything to make any human being remember that he had lived, and that to leave the world a little better place for his having lived in it was what he desired to live for, and that worthy ambition became his lodestar, much as it did for Lewis Katz. And all of us who loved Lewis Katz can find solace in the knowledge that his name, too, will live on in the Katz Academies in Camden, the Lewis Katz Building at Penn State, Temple University School of Medicine. But even more important than these physical monuments will be the countless memories of Lewis's friends, colleagues, children, and grandchildren. I believe that Lewis's attitude toward death was more like that of Theodore Roosevelt, one of the other guys I lived with over the years, who did not believe in posthumous fame. What he cared about instead, he said, and I think Lewis would agree, was to die in harness, with the consciousness of having lived a long and honorable and useful life. Theodore Roosevelt once speculated in the days or hours before dying, it must be pleasant to feel that you have done your part as a man, and that your children's children, in short, all those who are dearest to you, have just cause of pride in your actions. And surely Lewis knew that he had done his part as a man, and that his children's children and all those dearest to him have abundant, fierce, everlasting pride in him and in his actions. As Lewis left the Colonial Inn for Hanscom Field and the doomed plane, he hugged me and talked about my sons, Michael and Joe. He then spoke of Drew and Melissa and his beloved grandchildren. And he said that beyond all the interest the two of us had shared over our 20 years of friendship, for politics and history, for journalism and sports, what truly bound us together was the love and pride we both felt for our families. And oh my God, these were the last words I would hear Lewis say. Having loved history all my life, I believe with every fiber of my being that people truly live on in the memory of others, that the public figures we have respected in history and the private people we have loved in our families really can live on, so long as we pledge to tell and to retell the stories of their lives. And I know that every one of us here will be telling stories about Lewis Katz as long as we live, and in that way, we will keep this extraordinary man alive forever.
I look at the picture here and I just know that this is the way I saw him every day of my life when I was with him, and this is the way I'll always remember him, and this is the way I will always miss him. You've all heard how caring and generous and humorous that Lou is and was. And I could add to that for hours, but I know it's getting late, and I'll simply talk about the fact that he was my best friend. He was the best man at my wedding to Lynn, and he was the best man because he is the best man I've ever known. One time, we were walking and talking about funerals, and he said, you know, everyone comes to the funeral, and except for the family, when they leave, they generally forget all about that person. But I want to tell you, Lou, I'll remember you every single day of my life, and so will many, many other people, probably hundreds or thousands of people that you've touched. And as much as I know about Lou, I've heard stories today that I never heard from him. He never bragged about anything that he ever did. He was just a spectacular human being. And what a great family man. His kids, his grandkids, his sister meant everything to him. Melissa and Drew, I know how difficult this is for you, but I know that he would want you to be strong and to celebrate his wonderful life. I've never, ever been to a testimonial like this, ever. He is absolutely unique. I've never known anyone like him. He's irreplaceable. I still can't accept not having him walk into my office unannounced and making everyone in the office laugh for the rest of the day. We never had a phone conversation without saying at the end, I love you, man. And boy, do I love that man.
I will now tell a joke. It has nothing to do with Lewis. It's just that the feeling here is not one that I'm quite used to, where the people are confused about whether they're supposed to clap or applaud or whatever. And these stories about Lewis keep coming and coming and coming. And the joke is about a man who died, and he was not a nice man. Terrible person. And this is a true story. I won't name the person. Funeral was held at a synagogue. Had nothing to do with the culture or the religion. That's who he was. And the rabbi, I'm told, said, before we close the coffin, if this is true, someone has to come up and say something nice about the deceased. They waited. So the rabbi said, I'm very serious. I'm not closing this coffin, and you will all stay here until someone comes up and says something nice about the deceased. And the man got up whose shoes were too large for his feet, and you could hear the heels clopping. And he came up and he stood in front of the coffin and he said, His brother was worse. I'm looking at people Lewis has given to, spoken to, helped, and I'm listening to them talk about Lewis doing this. Lewis can't do that anymore. Camden, the city. This man was born there, lower economic, no father, that he would know of, and a strong mother to keep him with her wisdom and her wit and her love out of harm's way. And Lewis followed. And then Lewis, graduating from high school, no money, not knowing, received from an anonymous donor enough money to enter Temple University. He could have gone anywhere. And then he went to Dickinson, and from what I'm told, and I was told this by Peter Leocoris, he still has the mark of the highest grades ever. Let's hear some applause for that. This is Lewis Katz from Camden. He doesn't know where he's going, but Lewis Katz knows what he's doing. And Lewis Katz knows about education, and he drives it. His mother. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not for you to be sad, to worry about Lewis Katz, who is dead, but for you to realize the Boys and Girls Club that he put up the money for, it's there. Lewis Katz is not going to donate again. It is up to you, Camden. It's up to you, the people. Do not trust the end of that quote that says that these people will never be able to repay or give again, because they will. You don't have to have big money. All you have to have is yourself. The Boys and Girls Club. I don't care. I've met people, regardless of race, color, or creed, that you would never suspect that they had anything, who will give $3 because that's all they have to give to something to help someone they've seen. I've met people who have no money, who have volunteered themselves to teach, to make well, to make better. So, the end of that particular quote is not necessarily true. Camden, Boys and Girls Club, the church, the synagogue. I want every last one of you to know that I'm standing here. I'm not challenging you. I'm telling you, you better not let it drop. You better not let it fall. You better not let stains, graffiti, or anything touch these buildings without it being washed off immediately. Am I clear? Because he gave it to you. It's yours. It's not yours to wait for somebody else to come along. It's not yours for you to sit and say, well, the weeds are growing all around it and nobody's coming. Get something and cut them. And you don't wait for people to come along and do it. You do it. And don't wait for them to come along after you've done it to do it. Because many people live like that. Well, he'll do it. She'll do it. That's the way they live. But there are people in our life. Pass it on. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to tell people, we ought to do this because I saw that. The children need, he gave the money because he is a child from poverty. Hello? Where's he from? Poverty. Camden. Camden. Who would have thought it? Camden. So come on, Camden. Come on, that Boys and Girls Club, it has to stay. It has to be there. And all who come through it or pass by it will know that this is worth keeping as a jewel on whatever street it's on. The synagogue, whatever street it's on. The church, whatever street it's on. Lewis Katz put the money up. He's gone, but his life lives, not his name on the wall, in what you do with the gift that was given to you. Camden. It's too quiet in here. And it isn't for me. It's for these people who came and gave you the true stories of a man who gives. And so I want all of you to organize, to keep alive the spirit, the gift that is given to you, to maintain it. The Temple University Hospital. No, we're not going to have a hospital that will reject people. Not because Lewis Katz gave a lot of money. And so that hospital has to have the integrity to do what Lewis Katz would want it to do. It has to be held as a jewel. We must maintain it. We have to do that. We're alive. And so we weep, but we also will do. Are you with me? Huh? All right. That's all I have to say. The reason why I got up was because I wanted to get up and go to the bathroom. And because my eyesight is not good, and there was a step off and the people got excited. And I said, I want to pee. And Snyder said, sit down. He said, you're old enough that you can pee on yourself. And people will forgive you. Let me get back to my finishing punch. You will treat these things as gifts, and when you get great gifts, You don't throw them in the trash can. You keep polishing them. You put them in a place where people can see them. The Boys and Girls Club will grow, and you will harvest from the children they've saved. And the parents of the children you've saved will cry at their graduations. But just because you get an education doesn't mean anything. Because there's an old saying, I don't know if it's black or southern or what, but it says you send a fool to college, you get an educated fool back. I will tell you this last story, which is one that I really and truly love, and this is directed to Lewis's children and the grandchildren. So it's the pearly gates of heaven. I don't know who's in charge, but there's a spirit. And up comes a female soul, a genius, a writer, so forth, a scientist, and the spirit says, okay, now look, I want to tell you something. And then another male soul came up and says, okay, come over here, let me just tell you, you've both qualified. And then an old couple came up together, husband and wife died, married 63 years. He said, okay, come on, put a lock on any other souls coming up. Let me just tell them, look, things have changed. God requires, you've all qualified because of your life down there. But here's what, take a pencil, piece of paper, pencil, piece of paper. The two of you just need one pencil, one. And you have to write down a question that you think God cannot answer, and if God cannot answer, you get in. So he took the paper, and the spirit went in, came out, and said to the female soul, is that answer correct? Oh, yes, it's correct, I'm sorry. And God has given me a question. He said, well, you go over there. He says, and you? Yes, this is the correct answer, same thing. He says, okay, so you go, and you two come in with me. So the elderly couple went in. So the spirit came back, the two souls are still there. She said, those two people, they went in, and were they geniuses? He said, no. She just married 63 years. She said, well, is that affirmative action for people married? She said, no. They really asked God a question. God didn't know the answer. So they said, well, could you tell us the question? He said, sure. He said, they asked God when their children were going to get their act together. My mother's still waiting. But ladies and gentlemen, the jewels that he left, we've got to maintain. And it doesn't take much. If you have $1.50, give. If you have nothing but a spirit and a hope and a want to help, ask and give. That's all. And if you continue that, these stories of Lewis giving, your $1.50 can match that because that's all you had. And continue to do so with love. On behalf of myself, I approve this message.
If I am not for myself, who will be? If I am only for myself, what am I? If not now, when? To all of you, you may know this quote. It's from Rabbi Hillel. It may just seem like another ancient quote, but to me, it's what I believe represents my Papi Lewis. I use these as the final words of my bar mitzvah speech. My Papi helped me write that speech. He taught me how to be comfortable in front of large crowds. I was able to feel him help me write this speech for all of you, and I think he did a pretty good job. My Papi and I, we had the best Papi-grandson relationship anybody could ever imagine. He would take me places. He would teach me important lessons that I'll never be able to forget. He would comfort me in times when I needed comfort. But most importantly, my Papi gave me so much love, I could never repay him. My Papi, he would tell me that the most important asset in my life was time. He told me not to waste a minute because time is so precious. And I've realized over the past couple of days how precious my 14 years with my Papi really were. So a couple years ago, my Papi walked into a pet shop and he walked out with a chocolate-covered dog bone. Of course, he thought it was a delicious Italian bakery. My Papi loved to cheat on his diet. He ate the whole bone. He was so embarrassed, our whole family watched him eat it. A few weeks ago, my Papi came to my school. He spoke with my fellow students and teachers about what it's like to speak in public and what it means to communicate. He was so amazing, and he made no preparations. He blew my mind, he blew my peers' minds, and he blew the minds of my teachers. I was so happy that I got to see my Papi talk in front of my grade that day, and it's an amazing memory I'll never be able to forget. So, I go to camp for 7 weeks. I go to a camp called Tyler Hill. Unfortunately, Papis are not allowed at camp. This was difficult for my Papi. So we went on a trip to Boston, and immediately when my Papi found out, he had to take advantage. So he is friendly with the baseball superstar Shane Victorino. So he called up the owner of my camp and said to him, "So I have a superstar baseball player. I want him to talk to the kids." And the owner said, "Sure." He said, "Great, I'll bring him." I had no idea of this. I had no idea that this was a plan. So I remember perfectly walking off the bus in Boston with my friends and seeing Papi standing at the end of the road. I run up to him, I gave him the biggest hug, and I said, "Hey, Papi, how are you?" He looks at me, he says, "How are you? What about how are you doing here in Boston?" So my Papi would do anything, and he would travel anywhere to be with me. This was a quality he learned from my Nana Marjorie, who I love and miss. When I spent time with my mom and my Papi, it made me very happy because the bond that the three of us had together was so unbreakable. My dad, my Papi, and I, we were like a three-man team. We did everything together and we always had a blast. I know that each and every one of you, my Papi affected in some sort of way. Whether you did business with him, whether you were a personal friend, or maybe you were a hard-working waiter in a restaurant and he decided to befriend you. He impacted everyone in such a certain way that I got to witness. It was so amazing. And the impact that he had on my life, it was so big that I wouldn't be the same person without him. My Papi was my best friend. I will never forget him. For as long as I live, Poppy Lewis will be in my heart. He was the light of my life, and I know life without him won't be the same, but I promise his legacy will live forever. Rest in peace, Poppy Lewis. You'll always be my number one.
It's my son. I had an interesting morning this morning with the police escort because the only dealings I have ever had with the police, my daddy was trying to get me out of. It's true. In the most unluckiest of times, ironically enough, I can't feel luckier. I told my brother last night, how lucky were we to have had the parents that we did, to have been blessed enough to be born into the family in which we were. We were raised by quite simply the best. And as I stand here today to honor a man who was a hero to the world around him, but to me, he was just my daddy. My daddy. My earliest memory of my daddy was that every morning in our house in Fox Hollow, he would kiss me goodbye through the spokes of our staircase. He was tall at 6'3", and he was able to get just about to the top. I would climb step by step to kiss my daddy goodbye before he set out to his workday. As a kid, I would love to stop by his law office during the day because he would light up ear to ear. But just to stop by was always the best idea, rather than try and make a career out of being there. He once made the colossal mistake of hiring me. I was asked to make 3 copies of a huge case he was working on. Somehow, the sorter of the copy machine and I didn't get along, and within hours, needless to say, I was gainfully unemployed. This seemed to happen to me a lot in my early years. I was hired as a busgirl at the Jersey Shore in a restaurant on the waterfront, and about a week into my new gig, I dragged the garbage from the kitchen through a packed Saturday night dining room to get out to the back to the compactor. I once again had to tell my pop I was let go, and without a summer job. He calmly said, "Melissa, you're leaving for college soon. Why not have a little summer fun, and we'll get to the career part together at a later time." My daddy, my staunch supporter in life, I did not make it easy. I caused some bumps along the way until my real calling came, my job in life that I was most equipped for was to be a mommy. It was during my labor, and I was living in his apartment on 57th Street while renovating a new one. I went into labor on a Sunday night in August of 1999, and I quickly realized that my father was 1,000 times more nervous than both Stephen and I were. He fell in love so quickly with my children. It was almost like all of his senses came alive in every way possible. and with each child, he beamed more and more. He was in love over and over again, and his life's purpose had instantly changed. He was now a poppy all the time, 1,000% devoted, always there. Dance, basketball, tennis, play dates, swimming lessons, barbecues, birthday parties. He was always there. He asked me year after year, Melissa, are they old enough yet that they'll remember me? I just want to create memories for my grandchildren. Melissa, your oldest, he's 9 now. How about now? Can you remember, Melissa, things from 9? Melissa, Brooke, she's 11. She'll for sure remember me now, right? How about that Ethan's a bar mitzvah boy? Now, right? And the little ones, Taryn and Remy, sweetheart, they'll know me now, right? Right, Daddy? I promise, I swear here, in front of all these people who have come to honor you, I swear, you will never be a distant memory. Never, Daddy, who left an indelible mark on all of our lives. My daddy taught us, and well, to think about other people and how to take time to better people's lives, to touch them somehow, do things that you know in your heart can never be repaid. He took the time to listen. He taught us to really listen to people when they spoke and try and get to know them and hear their story. I never went to a restaurant where my daddy didn't leave the same amount of a tip as to match the actual bill. He made everyone, no matter what they did for a living, whether you were a janitor, cleaning the floors on 26th and Madison, where his Kinney office was in New York, or you were the President of the United States, he made everybody feel at ease, like they were the most important person in the room. My daddy, my love, who I am convinced hung the moon just for me. I will miss you beyond measure. Your voice and the gentle way in which I was greeted every morning. Tell me, how's my little girl? I will miss you, Daddy, as will our babies, for the rest of our lives. Rest peacefully, our hero, our best friend, our Poppy Lewis. We love you so. In life, you will lose someone you can't live without, and your heart will be badly broken. And the bad news is that you will never get over the loss of your beloved. But the good news is that they live forever in your broken heart that doesn't seal back up, and you come through. It's like having a broken leg that never heals perfectly. It still hurts when the weather gets cold, but you learn to dance with a limp.
I am heartbroken, not a little heartbroken, My heart is shattered into a zillion pieces. And I will I will cry a lot while I'm up here today. In fact, if all I did was stand before you and cried, what greater honor could I bestow upon my beloved father? My father prepared me for everything in life except for this. And while we're celebrating the life of the most uncommon of men, I lost my best friend and father on Saturday night, and they were the same person. How could I be so lucky to be my father's son? How could I be so lucky to be my mother's son? How could we be so unlucky to lose our mom in December and our dad on Saturday night? I don't know the answer. And I don't know how I'm going to go on without the two most important people in my life. But the outpouring of love, support, texts, calls, Facebook posts, tweets, emails, articles has given me the strength to stand before you today. A friend sent me a note this morning in which she quoted Camille Cosby, who said, "When the unthinkable happens, we must embrace the pain." I don't know how to do that yet, but I will try my best. So how does a man born into poverty a few miles across the river, a man who slept on a sofa with upholstery buttons that was so uncomfortable because his room could not fit a bed, how does he become the giant that he became throughout his life? It makes no sense. He had no father to teach him, like I did. His mother worked 2 jobs, day and night, to provide what little my aunt and father had. She had no time to love. She had to survive. How did he do it? He was a force of nature, brilliant, hardworking, savvy, funny. God, was he funny, and tough as nails in business. He created a perception, and that perception created a reality. I remember a time as a child where he told me a story. Again, President Carter. He was invited to the White House for a dinner. It was a state dinner. Hundreds, if not thousands of people in attendance at the dinner. And the next day I sat in his office and he was on the phone. And every person he spoke to, he said, "Yeah, I had dinner with the president last night." And they all thought he had dinner with the president. He created that reality until it became a reality. All of these amazing qualities propelled him to incomprehensible success. You know all about it. You read all about it. You heard all about it. Let me tell you a few more things you might not have known. Did you know that when 3 of my friends from New York got off the train and went to the line to catch a taxi yesterday to go to the memorial service, the porter looked at them and said, "You are all very well dressed. Why are you all in suits?" And one of them said, "We're going to a funeral." And the man said, "You're not going to Lewis Katz's funeral, are you?" And when he said yes, the porter wiped away a tear and said, "Lewis Katz was my friend." Did you know that there are 3 waiters in Boca Raton, Florida, where my dad spent much of his time, who have been crying nonstop the last few days? My father would take them to the Bahamas every year, and they would go gambling together and have a day and an experience. As Bill Marimo said, Did you know that every year he took his best friends from Camden on a different adventure because he loved them and wanted to create a memory? My dad's best business success was in the business of making memories. He lived every day like it was his last, and I mean that not in a bad way, but in the best way. Even on the last day of his life, he took his neighbor from the shore, his childhood friend, my dear Marcy, who was the person who made that charter school happen in Camden. He took them to Boston to meet Doris Kearns Goodwin and learn about her son's school, a woman they all admired so much. My father wanted to make memories. Memories. For me, my whole life, I'll never forget being a little boy, the biggest Eagles fan one could imagine, sound asleep on a Wednesday night, 10 o'clock at night. My dad sneaks into my room and he wakes me up and he says, "Come on, get dressed." I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Come on, get dressed." I said, "Mom will be very upset. It's a school night." "I don't care about Mom. Get dressed." I got dressed. I put on my Phillies cap. And I went out to this party, where at this party was my hero, Ron Jaworski, Harold Carmichael, Wilbert Montgomery. And my dad had driven home, grabbed me, and brought me back when he saw that they were there, making memories. You heard my amazing nephew speak. He reminded me that he was going to be a tough act to follow. And he was. By the time this young man was 13 years old, he was LeBron James's ball boy at an NBA All-Star game. He had a swimming lesson from Michael Phelps. He played baseball with Chase Utley. He hit tennis balls with Noah Djokovic. And he caught a touchdown from Andrew Luck. Memories. And he's the sweetest kid on the planet. It did not make him anything. Ethan, look at me. Look at me. I told you yesterday, and I tell you today, with a lot of witnesses, I promise you, I know that your dream in life was to learn how to become a businessman from Poppy. I will do everything I can to teach you everything he taught me. I promise you that. And I'll probably be a little easier on you than he was on me. You see, what the reporters don't know, what many of you don't know, is that my dad's greatest accomplishment, his greatest love, had nothing to do with his work, it was his family. He loved the four of you so much. He loved you more than life itself. You were everything to him. And as much pain as you are in today, for me, for my beautiful new wife, I can't imagine that his future grandchildren will never get the opportunity to know him. And you have to promise me back that you will regale them with stories about their Poppy, and you will make them understand and live through your experiences. My sister and I are so deeply honored to have everyone here today, to have the greatest president of the United States in our lifetime come to Philadelphia. To honor my father. Wow. To have our mayor, our governor, one of my dearest friends in life, Senator Booker, President Theobald, Governor Rendell, Ed Snyder, Doris, each and every one of you, Bill, William. Wow. It doesn't make sense. It's so overwhelming. And I'm so appreciative. Thank you. I know it's been a long day, but I don't care. I don't, because this is the day for me to honor my father. So please indulge me for just a few short stories. When I was a kid, my dad was my coach. He was my Little League coach, and it was a good thing that he was my Little League coach because I was such a bad athlete that I wouldn't have gotten in the game if he wasn't my coach. Then when it came to basketball, he was the referee, and in the first game, I got 2 technical fouls. So he decided to be the coach then, too. When I was a little boy, he taught me I wanted to learn how to drive. So he put me on his lap and let me drive. We got pulled over. My dad was playful, irreverent, loving. But I had a strange experience in the last handful of years. You see, he lived in an apartment in Manhattan for 20 years, and it was one of his best friend's buildings, and it was a rental. And the best friend said to him after 20 years, "It's time for you to move out." And my father said, "You're evicting me?" And he said, No, I'm not evicting you. I'm just telling you it's time to move out. My son would like the apartment. It had a swimming pool, a triplex. It's time for you to get your own place. So my dad knocked on my door. I was newly engaged to my wife. And he said, do you mind if I crash with you a couple days a month, while I'm looking for a new apartment? And I said, sure, no problem. 2 years later, my father was still living with me. And he wasn't always the easiest house guest, and he never saw a coaster that he ever used. But I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something that you really don't know about my father. As outgoing as he is, there's a part of him that is shy. And when it came to the relationship to the woman that I love and the woman that I married, he was shy. And my beautiful wife, by nature, is shy. So, but for those 2 years where he would come out in his pajamas and she would come downstairs in a t-shirt and her underwear just to drink coffee, they wouldn't have gotten to know each other in that wonderful, organic, natural, and easy way that they did. I wasn't trying to be funny. She had a long shirt on. I love that time. I'll cherish that time. And in his own way, he would find neighborhood places that were mine, and he would make them his own. And I'll never forget the day that he took my nephew and a bunch of people on an airplane to go to the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, my nephew is a Giants fan, and the Giants were in the Super Bowl in Indianapolis. And we got on the plane, and I looked around, and I saw what looked to be a familiar face, and I was confused, and I took a double take. And there, in the last seat of the plane, was the cashier from the coffee shop that I used to get my coffee on her way to the Super Bowl. Commissioner, now you understand why he asked for so many tickets. I love the story that I heard from Ed Snyder, who is like a father figure now to me, that he once got on his airplane and my father had removed all of the family photos and put pictures of himself all over the plane. And when you were Commander-in-Chief, Mr. President, and you talked about that trip that you came to Newark for an event with my dad. He did what any sane person would do. We went to Teterboro, about 5 miles from Newark. We flew down to Washington, D.C. to get on your plane and come back to Newark. I will never forget the tour that you gave us, and I will never forget when you told us there was a swimming pool on the ground level of the plane. And my father believed you and said, "There's a swimming pool?" So we're sitting on Air Force One, one of the greatest memories of my life, with my hero, and there's a phone. And he picks up the phone, and the Air Force operator says, "Yes, Mr. Katz, what can I do for you?" And he said, "Would you do me a favor and call my mother and announce that you're calling from Air Force One?" The operator said, "Sure, Mr. Katz, what's your mother's number?" "Oh, she's been dead for like 40 years. But this is Air Force One." How many meetings did I go to? How many meetings did I set up later in life that I brought him where he showed up in a lime green t-shirt from the Gap, matching sweatpants, high socks, and yellow sneakers? I mean, countless. Life was always interesting with Lewis Katz. I see you're laughing because you're dressed kind of similarly. I grieve today with my family. I haven't stopped grieving over the loss of my beautiful mom 5 short months ago. But today I also grieve for the families and friends and loved ones of Michael, Jim, Terry, Susan, and my dear Marcy. May God give each of you the strength to get through this horrifying time. My sister and I believe that my mom missed my dad so much that she called for him. We imagine they're bickering right now with each other as we speak. And my mom is telling him to be quiet and listen to my eulogy. My dad was far from perfect. He had a shadow like everybody in this room. But boy, did he try to make people's lives better. Sometimes with or without his family's name on a building. Sometimes with his family's name on a building, and sometimes anonymously. My dad had a motto that sits in his office, and it reads, "Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can." As you can tell, I had the good sense to come second and let my dad pave the way. Daddy, I could never fill your shoes, but I will walk in your path. You have left a larger-than-life legacy, and I will do my best to honor it, to emulate it, to preserve it, to make it my life's work. Death can end a life, but it cannot end a love. Dad, I will love you until the day I die, and then from the other side. In the words of Maya Angelou, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Dad, you made so many people you came into contact with feel so very special. I will end with a prayer I love, a prayer about remembering. We will remember you. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we will remember you. In the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we will remember you. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember you. In the blueness of the sky and the warmth of summer, we will remember you. In the rustling of the leaves and the beauty of autumn, we will remember you. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember you. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember you. When we are lost and sick of heart, we will remember you. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember you. For as long as we live, you too shall live, for you are a part of us, and we will remember you.
We'd like to conclude by offering Temple University's salute to the quintessential Temple alum, Lewis Katz. Those of you on the stage may want to turn your seats so that you can see the screen behind you. Most of the footage comes from last month's graduation ceremony when we awarded Dr. Katz, and he was very proud of that, an honorary degree. Lewis delivered what I can honestly say was the finest commencement address that I've heard in 3 decades in academia. It seems appropriate to let him have the place of honor as our final speaker. At the conclusion of the video, please join us for refreshments at Mitten Hall, which is directly to my right. And if you will let the stage party leave and please the family exit first before you go. So would we show the video, please? As a member of the Temple University Board of Trustees, Lewis Katz is a thoughtful voice of authority who places the best interests of Temple students above all other considerations.
I came here, I know you're not going to believe it because of my face, 55 years ago. I was scared, I was so unsure of myself, and I remember my first day feeling like I was on another planet. I was lost. I learned from Bill Cosby at a very young age, at 20, if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will. I was a kid from Camden, New Jersey.
I dreamed of being an NBA player. But after being cut from my junior high school team and my high school team, I realized the only way I wasn't going to get cut is if I bought an NBA team. I pushed myself to get involved. I made friends 50 years ago who found their way into my heart and into my soul. I am going to give a gift to Temple in thankfulness for its helping me in so many, many ways. But most of all, to help create some self-confidence. And it'll be in the amount of $25 million, which is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. What you can do is you can make every effort in your life to make a difference. Life, in my view, is meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to have as much fun as you can conjure up. Remember, success isn't about material things. Watch. Study people you admire. Work matters, but family matters more. If I leave one thing for my grandchildren, it's the knowledge and the responsibility that those who have been lucky and fortunate need to share. Hope, it keeps us going. Work gives life meaning. Make time for those who need you and for the causes you believe in. By giving you what I think is the mantra of my life. There was a basketball coach, maybe the best ever in college, at UCLA, by the name of John Wooden. He said one thing that has resonated with me for as long as I've lived. He said, you can't live a perfect day. You can't live a perfect day without doing something for someone who will never be able to repay you. Who will never be able to repay you.
Well, that's a pretty good, man.